The Chicago Bears still have a lot of cash to spend this offseason. Here are some potential players they could still sign in the coming weeks. What's going on, guys? I'm back with another Chicago Bears offseason discussion video. If you guys want more videos from me covering the Bears this offseason, including training camp, which is coming up in just under a month now. So if you guys want videos breaking those down, other stuff, highlights and all, definitely be sure to subscribe to my channel. I'll be coming out with a lot of Bears content throughout the rest of the year. But in today's video, I'll be talking about the Bears and the money that they still have to spend on free agency this year. So in case you guys didn't know, the Bears have $23.1 million in cap space for 2022. Okay, after most of free agency has already happened, after we signed the majority of our draft picks, we still have to sign, keep in mind, on both our second round picks, both Jaquan Brisker and Kyler Gordon. So those contracts will take away from this number, but second round picks only make like 1.5 million max per year. So we're still going to have around $20 million after we sign Brisker and Gordon, which is more than enough money to go out and sign somebody to help your current football team. Obviously, we all know that the Bears have an insane amount of cap space next season to spend. So next season is going to be when all of our major signings happen, right? We have almost $100 million to spend. The second closest team, the Seahawks, only have $55 million to spend. So we have the most cap space by a huge margin. We can practically outbid any team we want on any player we want because we'll have the cap space to do so. But this year, guys, for this current NFL year, we still have $20 million, which I think we should be spending, right? I mean, you can obviously carry that money over to the next year, but why do so when you already have, more than enough money for next season? And when your current team could definitely use some help. There's a bunch of free agents still out there that could definitely be of use to the Chicago Bears this year. After free agency, after the NFL draft, the Bears team currently still has a lot of holes on it, especially on the offensive side of the football. If you take a look at the Bears offensive line, it's largely unproven talent. Okay, the only proven guy I think that we have on the team right now is Cody Whitehair, and even Cody Whitehair had kind of a down year last year. We have a lot of guys with the potential, Tevin Jenkins, Larry Borom. We signed Lucas Patrick, who was a solid player for the Packers whenever he had to play. We got a bunch of guys in the draft too, but majority of these guys are unproven. If you look at the Bears receiving core, Mooney obviously is very nice. Okay, he's one of the better, I feel like one of the more underrated receivers in the NFL, because even last year as the number one option, he put together some really good performances in a Matt Nagy offense that was one of the worst in the NFL. He still produced. So I have a lot of high hopes for Mooney. I think he's going to be a great receiver for us, but beyond Mooney, again, question marks. Okay, Byron Pringle, I love his speed, I love his athleticism, like what he brings to the table, but he was the number 4 option, for the Chiefs. Velus Jones, a lot to like as well, but again, a rookie, unproven. So am I optimistic about certain players taking steps forward? Yeah, I am, but it would be nice to add more proven talent to the current team, because there's proven talent out there that could definitely be signed by the Chicago Bears. We have more than enough money to sign some of these guys. Also, if you look at the D-line, I think our D-line could also use some help, especially because Robert Quinn, we don't know what the story is with him. Okay, he might not be on the Bears roster week 1 this year because he hasn't showed up to, any of the camps so far. So in this video, I'll be going over some of the better free agent options out there that the Bears could sign to potentially fill in some of these holes. Now, these are mainly going to be wide receivers, offensive linemen, and defensive linemen, because I feel like those are the 3 areas where the Bears could use the most help. But let's just get into the video. Okay, so the first guy I think the Bears could potentially sign is center Tretter. I'm extremely shocked that no team has signed him up to this point, because Tretter legitimately is one of the best centers in the NFL. Okay, over the past few years, if you look at his play with the Cleveland Browns, first of all, he's been very durable for them. He's played basically every single game. Even though he was suffering some injuries down the stretch last year, he still played in every single game. So a tough guy, always wants to be on the field, and if you look at his play, one of the best pass blocking centers in the NFL. He can move as well, good in the run game, and overall just a very good football player that you would want on your offensive line. He's a great leader as well. He was the leader of the NFLPA. I believe he's still the leader of the NFLPA. So his peers clearly respect him. He's a strong voice in the locker room, and he would be a great, mentor to some of the younger guys on the Bears offensive line. Now, the question is, why is he not signed yet? Okay, people think that it might be because of contract demands, or maybe because of injuries, right? Because last year, reportedly, he didn't practice at all due to injuries. Now, he still played every game and he still played very well, so it's not like that mattered to his play last year, but maybe injuries have taken a toll on him, and we don't really know what the story is behind the scenes, but if the Bears have a shot to get him, why not take the risk? Okay, it's probably only going to be a 1-2 year deal, because no other team seems interested in him right now, as at least according to what I can see, and he would immediately be the best player on the Bears offensive line. You could easily kick Lucas Patrick to guard. I know that we signed Lucas Patrick to play center, but he's a versatile player. He played a lot of guard with the Green Bay Packers and was fine there, so he could easily go to guard. You put JC Tretter at center and you'd be making your offensive line a hell of a lot better just by making that move. So I would really like to see us go after JC Tretter. Next guy on my radar is Duane Brown, okay, tackle from the Seattle Seahawks. Now, Duane Brown is getting up there in age. He's going to be 37, I believe, this season. So, definitely nearing the end of his career. But if the Bears want an offensive lineman that could provide them with some solid level play, okay, not elite level play at this point in his career because he is getting older, but maybe kind of giving them like a Jason Peters type of presence. Okay, Jason Peters last year was in some games our best offensive lineman simply because he had so much experience and he's played at a high level before in his career, and he was a great mentor to some of the other guys like Tevin Jenkins and Larry Borom. Okay, both those guys talked about how important it was having Jason Peters in the locker room for them. So if you look at Duane Brown's last season, it was probably the worst of his career, but it still was a relatively decent season. Okay, he allowed 33 pressures, he did allow 8 sacks, but if you compare that to all the other left tackles in the league, he was still above average, according to most rankings. So again, you're not going to be getting an elite player, but he clearly fits the scheme. He can move. He has a lot of experience, so you wouldn't be relying on young players to fill the left and right tackle spots, which we are doing right now, which kind of does worry me, right? Because what if one of our young guys does not take the step forward that we expect them to? Then we're going to have a huge hole on the offensive line, which is going to be disastrous for Justin Fields. So we need to get some type of veteran presence in here, and Duane Brown could be that presence. He's probably going to be coming on a cheap 1-year deal like we signed Jason Peters to last year. So I think that this would be a solid signing for the Chicago Bears. Next guy we could sign, guard Erik Flowers. Okay, another offensive lineman. He played for the Washington Commanders last year, still a free agent. Now, he would not be the best scheme fit, I think, because he is on the bigger side. He's 334 pounds, not the most athletic, so this might not be an option for the Bears, but right now we probably have a 6th-round rookie starting at right guard for the Bears, which makes me really nervous, and he's signing like Erik Flowers, even if he has a questionable scheme fit, wouldn't make people breathe a lot easier. Okay, if you look at his pass blocking, it's ranked among the top in the NFL over the last 2 years. His run blocking could use a lot of work. He's not the best, most aggressive run blocker, so again, questionable scheme fit there, because I think Luke Getsy is going to run the football a lot. But if you want a solid guy in pass protection, a guy that can be serviceable for this year while you look for a long-term option at guard, Erik Flowers could be your guy. Let's take a look at some receivers now, and one guy that would fit Justin Fields' skill set the best is Will Fuller. Okay, this guy, again, I'm kind of surprised he's available, but last year was a bad year for him. He suffered, some injuries. He also had some personal issues, and he just did not play much for the Dolphins, which was pretty bad for him. But before the Dolphins, guys, he was one of the more underrated receivers in the NFL. He was never like a number one option, but he was always a solid complementary option. Okay, he had 879 yards his last season in Houston. Also had 8 touchdowns that year as well. If you look at his other seasons, he had 7 touchdowns in 2017. He had 670 yards in 2019. So always a solid big play threat for Deshaun Watson, who, in my opinion, has a skill set kind of similar to Justin Fields. Okay, both Deshaun Watson and Justin Fields love to throw the deep ball, and they're also willing to take some sacks to make big plays happen down the field. That's just their playing style. And if you want a guy that can fit Justin Fields' skill set the best, Will Fuller is your guy. Fast, explosive, can get open most importantly, and he would be a great benefit to Justin Fields in this scheme. Another receiver still available, one of the best receivers of all time, Julio Jones. Now, it's questionable that he would even want to come to the Bears because he probably only has like 1 or 2 years left max in his career. He's nearing the end. He's getting up there in age. He's getting injured frequently. So he probably wants one last chance at a ring, which the Bears, do not offer him this year, right? Like the Bears are not going to be in contention for 2022. We're more a team built for the future. But if he wants, one last payday, which the Bears could definitely afford to give him, I think this would be a great match for the Chicago Bears. I know that Bears fans will say Julio is old, he is washed up. Why would we pay a lot of money, to an older receiver? But guys, have you looked at our receiving core? Okay, we don't have any proven things at all for Justin Fields besides Darnell Mooney. Do you think Justin Fields would deny the opportunity to play with Julio Jones? He definitely would not. Okay, any Bears fan would love to have him. I know that him staying healthy is a big if. Okay, he gets injured now basically every year. He's probably not going to play full 17 games for you, but whatever games he is going to play for us, he's going to provide the Bears with a solid X receiver. He's a physical freak. He's tall as hell. You guys have seen Julio Jones dominate the league, right, over the past 10 plus years. He is nearing the end now, but whatever he has left in the tank, I still think would be good enough for the Bears in 2022, looking at the other receiving talent that we have on the roster right now. Another receiver still available, T.Y. Hilton from the Indianapolis Colts. He's played with the Colts his entire career. He's getting up there in age. Like all the other guys I've basically mentioned, he's going to be 33 years old this season. Last year was the worst season of his career. So, he's not going to be a superstar at this point in his career, but why not see what he has left in the tank? Okay, I just keep on saying, like, if you look at the Bears receiving core right now, it literally could not hurt to add any of these veterans. Okay, even if they don't play much for the Bears, we have the cap space and it could only be a net positive for the Bears for 2022. Okay, we don't have much experience in this receiving core. We don't have much production in this receiving core either, besides Mooney, like I keep on saying. So adding an older guy in T.Y. Hilton who, has familiarity with Matt Eberflus. Obviously with the Colts, he went up against Eberflus's defense in practice the last 4 years. I think it could be a worthwhile signing for the Chicago Bears. It'd probably be a cheap 1-year deal, not much risk involved at all, and just see what he has left in the tank in training camp. Okay, if he has a great training camp, then he could go into the season as one of our top 3 receivers and be, a big boost to Justin Fields in this offense. Let's also talk about a couple defensive linemen that are still available. One of them I really like is Sheldon Richardson, who could probably play the 3 technique for the Chicago Bears, or at least compete for that position. Okay, last year he played with the Vikings. Before that, he was with the Cleveland Browns. Also played with the Jets at the beginning of his career, and he's been a very solid presence on the defensive line for basically every team he's been on. If you look at his stats from last year, he had 37 total pressures, he had 4 sacks, he had 24 stops, he forced 1 fumble, he had 32 solo tackles. So even though he's getting up there in age, his play has been declining. Still a very solid football player, and the Bears could use solid football players on their defensive line. I mean, Eberflus has talked about how important the defensive line is to his defense, and they couldn't sign Larry Ogunjobi because of a failed physical. Now, they did sign Justin Jones as a backup option, but, it would not hurt at all to add Sheldon Richardson to make this defensive line even better. And finally, one last guy I think the Bears should look at is defensive end Justin Houston. He played defensive end under Eberflus. He's been an outside linebacker in the other schemes he's been on, but obviously with Eberflus, he would be going back to defensive end. And guys, under Matt Eberflus, he had some fantastic seasons. He basically had a career revival with the Indianapolis Colts. He had 11 sacks in 2019. He had 8 sacks in 2020. If you look at last year with the Ravens, he only had 4.5 sacks, but still a serviceable player for the Baltimore Ravens after all the injuries the Ravens had on that defense. And he would definitely be a serviceable player for the Chicago Bears this season as well. I know he's getting up there in age. He's not the same dominant pass rusher he used to be at the beginning of his career with the Kansas City Chiefs, but he's still good enough. And especially if we get rid of Robert Quinn, this could be a nice backup option for Robert Quinn to keep our defense still competitive this season. But yeah, that's basically the end of the video. There's also some other guys out there like Odell Beckham, like Ndamukong Suh, who I would love to have on the Chicago Bears, especially Odell Beckham. I'm a huge Odell fan. I think he was done wrong by the Browns, and when he went to the Rams, everybody found out again how good he still is when healthy. But the problem is Odell is not going to be healthy until, probably November or December of this year, which, it doesn't make sense for the Bears to go after a guy like that. I would still be okay with it, obviously, but I don't think Odell would even want to come to the Bears because he probably wants another chance at a Super Bowl, which the Bears cannot give him. But let me know if there's anybody I missed in the comments down below, if there's anybody else you would want the Bears to sign with the remaining money. But hope you guys have a good weekend, and as always, bear down.